Welcome back to PingStyles channel, your premier destination for in-depth table tennis analysis. Tonight, we're breaking down a match that will be talked about for years to come, the titanic final of the WTT Champions Chongqing 2026. In one corner, the French phenom, the maestro of the modern Penhold, Felix Lebrun. In the other, the fairy tale story of the tournament, the first ever wild card to storm his way to a men's singles final, China's own wrecking ball, Wen Ruibo. The arena was electric. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Watching, and the Wang, with his monstrous, cannon-like forehand, had blazed a trail of destruction to get here. But on the ultimate stage, it was Lebrun who lifted the trophy. The question on everyone's mind is, how? How did he do it? Tonight, we're going. This wasn't just a win. It was a tactical masterclass. Despite Wen Ruibo's pressure-free run and that devastating forehand, it was Lebrun's tactical maturity, his utterly unique Penhold style, and a display of superior nerve management under the brightest lights that secured his championship title. Let's get into the replay. First, let's get down to the nuts, bolts, the very foundation of Lebrun's game, his technical arsenal. It all starts with that grip. The Penhold grip isn't new, but what Felix does with it is revolutionary. Call it the modern Penhold. And in this final, it was his ultimate weapon. About the traditional shake-hand grip, it's solid, powerful, the bedrock of the European game. But Lebrun's Penhold offers a different kind of advantage, something almost intuitive. He's often described as having a sensory edge, and it's not hyperbole. With 3 fingers directly on the backhand, he's not just hitting the ball, he's feeling it. Every subtle vibration, every ounce of spin, the precise impact point. It's like he's receiving a direct data feed from the ball to his brain. Against a power player like Wang, who relies on overwhelming his opponents, this sensitivity allowed Lebrun to read the play a split second faster, to absorb and redirect power with uncanny precision. Then you have his backhand, what some are calling the pinhole. Look at the mechanics of it. Lebrun cuffs his fingers tightly, creating an incredibly rapid stroke. This isn't the big, looping backhand you see from many players. Vicious, piston-like punch executed incredibly close to the table. For Wang, this was a strategic nightmare. Wang's game is built on creating space, taking a half step back to unleash that massive forehand. But Lebrun gave him no space. He gave him no time. The tempo of those backhand exchanges was suffocating. Before Wang could even complete his backswing for a powerful counter, the ball was already past him. Lebrun's backhand timing completely Wang's natural rhythm, forcing him to rush, forcing him into uncomfortable off-balance shots. He effectively took Wang's biggest weapon out of the equation by never letting him get set to fire it. And perhaps the most dramatic evolution in Lebrun's game, on full display this final, was his serve-receive. For a long time, the short game was a potential weakness for Lebrun. Opponents would try to serve short and tight, forcing him to push or flick, hoping to draw a weak return. But in Chongqing, Lebrun turned that perceived weakness into a deadly weapon. 2 were calling it the dainty dink serve-receive, but there was nothing dainty about its effect. His touch at the net was simply elite. He was taking Wang's serves, no matter how spinny or low, and dropped them back just over the net with surgical precision. The ball would stay so tight, so low, that Wang was given absolutely nothing to attack. The man with the forehand in the tournament was being forced into a delicate pushing game, a battle of touch. He was simply not equipped to win against Lebrun. It was a masterclass neutralizing a threat before the battle had even begun. Having the tools is one thing, but deploying them as part of a flawless game plan is what separates champions from contenders. Lebrun's tactical execution in this final was nothing short of brilliant. It started with Lebrun played at a pace that was, frankly, a producer's nightmare. His transitions from third ball attack were so blindingly fast that the television replays could barely keep up. There was no breathing room, no moment for Wang to reset, to get comfortable. 2. It was a relentless, high-pressure assault from the very first point. This aggressive didn't just rush Wang. It played on the immense pressure he was already feeling, compounding every decision, shrinking the table, and forcing errors. Crucially, Lebrun dictated the terms of every engagement. He knew that if the match devolved into a slugfest, a simple backhand to exchange down the line, Wang's raw power might eventually win out. So, he refused to play that game. Lebrun orchestrated the rallies like a chess grandmaster. He controlled the exchanges with surgical precision, using heavy side spin on his loops and varying his placements constantly. He would pull Wang wide to the forehand, then jam him into his body with a quick punch to the crossover point, that awkward middle ground between a backhand and a forehand. Time and again, we saw Wang, a giant of a player, looking clumsy and out of position. His footwork completely broken by Lebrun's unpredictable patterns. Lebrun wasn't just hitting the ball. He was moving his opponent around the court on a string, waiting for the bopper's inevitable opening to strike the final blow. And then there was the secret sauce, the slow spin strategy. In a match defined by blistering pace, Lebrun's most effective tactic was often to take the pace off the ball. It's completely counterintuitive, but it was genius. Wang is a rhythm player who thrives on pace. He's used to opponents hitting hard, which allows him to use their power against them. Lebrun disrupted this completely. Using his reverse Penhold backhand, RPB, he would generate incredible amounts of side spin on slower looping balls. These shots would kick off the table at bizarre angles, dying on the bounce, or jumping away from Wang. Wang's timing, so finely tuned for pure, fast topspin, thrown into utter disarray. He was either swinging too early and hitting the net, or too late and sending the ball flying off the table. It was a classic of using finesse to dismantle brute force, proving that in table tennis, the speed of thought is often more important than the speed of the ball. In a final this magnitude, the battle is fought as much in the mind as it is on the table. And here, Lebrun's psychological edge was undeniable. You have to remember, despite his passes, this wasn't Lebrun's first rodeo. He's a Champions winner already. He's been on the racer, under the brightest lights, and it showed. He managed the moment with the calm composure of a seasoned veteran. His body language was steady, his focus unwavering. Game point for Rainbow. No panic, only process. To this composure translated directly into clutch performance when it mattered most. The Infinity Arena was a cauldron of noise, a sea of support for the hometown hero, Wenruibo. The pressure was immense. There were moments when luck against Lebrun, a cruel net cord that gave Wang a point, a missed edge ball, players would have crumbled. They would have shown frustration, let the moment get to them. But Lebrun was a rock. He saved multiple game points throughout the match with audacious, high-risk shots that demonstrated absolute self-belief. He stayed locked in, playing each point on its own merit, completely unfazed by the crowd or the scoreboard. This ability to execute game when the pressure is at its absolute peak is the true hallmark of a champion. On the other side of the net, you had the underdog's burden. The narrative going in was that Wenruibo had nothing to lose. He was the wild card, the surprise package. But that narrative flips when you reach the final. Suddenly, you have everything to lose. He was no longer just the underdog. He was the hope of China, the first wildcard finalist in history, with a nation's expectations resting on his shoulders. And that pressure, subtly at first, began to show in the crucial latter stages. In the games, we saw minor but fatal overexcited errors creep into his play. A forehand that was just a little too ambitious, sailing long. A rushed backhand into the net. These weren't physical failures. They were the symptoms of a mind feeling the immense weight of the moment. While Lebrun played with the freedom of a man who belonged, Wang played with the tension of a man desperate to prove he did, and in the end, that small difference was everything. This victory in Chongqing wasn't born. It was the culmination of a long, arduous process of development and preparation. To truly understand how Lebrun won, we have to look at the road he took to get here. The most visible change has been his physical transformation. Over the past year, Lebrun has dedicated himself in the gym, adding a reported 10 kilograms of solid muscle to his frame. Previously, he was a player defined almost entirely by his blinding speed and touch. Now, he has added a new dimension, power, that added core and allows him to stay in rallies longer, to generate more force on his own shots, and to absorb the power of players like Wang without being pushed off the table. This physical foundation was the engine that powered his relentless, high-tempo game for the entire match. There's also been a critical shift in his corner. The arrival of coach Jean René, who famously guided Hugo Calderano, has been a game-changer. Mounier has brought a breath of fresh air to Lebrun's strategy. He's helped refine Lebrun's tactical approach, sharpening his shot selection and developing game plans, specifically tailored to dismantling different types of opponents. Mounier's calm, analytical presence during timeouts was a stark contrast to the high-energy frenzy of the match, providing Lebrun with clear, concise instructions that kept him grounded and focused on the mission. This partnership has clearly unlocked a new level of tactical intelligence in Lebrun's game, and, to fully appreciate the magnitude of Lebrun's victory, we must acknowledge Wenruibo's formidable rise. This was no fluke run. Wang wasn't just a wild card, he was a wild card fire. He came into Chongqing fresh off a title win at the WTT contender Muscat, and on his path to the final, he did the unthinkable. he defeated the legendary Tomokazu Harimoto in a stunning display of power and aggression. He was playing with supreme tensor, confidence, backed by incredible form. The fact that Lebrun was able to stop this reign, to not just beat but tactically dismantle a player who had just taken out one of the world's best, makes this victory even more impressive. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. So, when we look back at the WTT Champions Chongqing 2026 final, the story is clear. Felix Lebrun didn't just win because he was faster. He won because he was smarter. He won with surgical precision, tactical intelligence, and a level of mental fortitude that belies his years. He took Wen Rubo's greatest strengths, his rhythm, his aggressive forehand, and systematically neutralized them one by one. He turned the match into a contest of strategy and touch, a game that his opponent was simply not prepared to play. Back in 2022, the great Ma Long, perhaps the greatest player of all time, predicted that Felix Lebrun would one day be a world champion. At time, it seemed like a bold but distant possibility. Tonight, in the heart of China against their newest rising star, that prediction looks increasingly and frighteningly accurate. Masterful performance, a clinic in modern table tennis. It's a win that doesn't just add another trophy to Lebrun's cabinet. It cements his status as the primary, most dangerous threat to the traditional dominance of the Chinese team. The king may not be dead, but the French prince has arrived, and he is coming for the crown.